you have any opening comments, Amanda, or should we jump straight into our first speaker?
I will say welcome, everybody. Hopefully this is the second time we're seeing you for the workshops. Thanks for being here. And thank you to Rob for organizing all of this. If you all want to know more about the Kentucky Academy of Science, if you're not a member, please go to kyscience.org. Thank you so much. We have a busy session today, I'm sure. So thanks,
Yeah,
Rob.
sure thing. Thank you. A good session, definitely. And we get to jump right into it with Madison Flory, who is with the Kentucky Advocates for Science Policy and Research at the University of Kentucky. And she is, in fact, also with the Kentucky Academy of Science because she's on board with us now doing some science policy work. So we are happy to welcome Madison, and I'll turn it over to her so she can talk about some of the advocacy work taking place at UK by students.
Awesome. Yeah. Are you guys all able to see that and everything?
Yes.
Hopefully it's going to go into full screen. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for that introduction, Rob. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me at any time, interrupt me. I don't care. So as Rob said, I am the president of CASPER this year. So that is our science policy group at the University of Kentucky. It is primarily graduate students, but we have some postdocs and a couple of undergrads as well. So we're open to anyone. And so our main event that we do is doing a State Hill Day and writing one-pagers in preparation for that. So we are actively in that process for this legislative season now. And so I'm going to kind of take you through what steps I do. If you have a different way that you like to do it and you've written one-pagers before, I'm not saying that my way is the only way or the correct way, but this is just the way I do it. So some of you may already be familiar with the General Assembly website. I know I've showed Casper this many a time, so they're probably tired of me talking about it. But so this is where I start to get all the bills, looking at different bills of interest. And you also have to keep in mind that this is constantly changing and being updated. So bills are moving through the process, different bills are being introduced, all of these things. And also something you're going to want to keep in mind is the process of how a bill actually goes into law. So after, it first has to get introduced and then it has to go into committee and then it goes through the whole House or Senate and then it has to go to the other chamber and do that exact same process all over again. So then this can either move really fast or really slow or not at all. So just kind of depending on bills, you have to keep an eye on what's moving, what's not, and go from there. And so then we want to willow down our list of bills, right? Because there's hundreds and hundreds of bills that are introduced. And so this is a page from our Casper spreadsheet this year, looking at some different women's health bills that we might be interested in pursuing. So we've got them grouped by different big categories and then broken down into smaller categories. Because some of these bills are really similar to each other, or they might have been introduced in both the House and the Senate. So in that case, we don't necessarily want to make a separate one pager for each of those things, but we can combine them into one that all has to do with access to feminine hygiene products, for example. And then you want to actually go into how are you writing your one pager, or how are you writing whatever you're going to write. And so you really have to think about what is your audience, who is your audience, who are you presenting this to? Often for us, that will be, legislators. And so then who are you? You also have to think about, and why do you have the authority to discuss what you're talking about, and why should they trust you as an expert in this topic? And you also really have to think about what you're asking them to do, whether that is to support a bill, to not support a bill, to amend a bill. These are all things that you can ask, and it's good to be very clear about what you want them to do, because they're busy people, you're busy people. Just the easier you can make it for them, it'll be better. And then you want to know why. So, answering these, questions that we were all taught in, English classes of who, what, when, where, why, how. Um, you want to answer all these questions for them. So why is this bill that you're advocating for important? How does it affect you? How does it affect the state of Kentucky? How does it affect their constituents? How are you going to solve the problem that this bill is um, amending, or that this bill is designed to solve? And then what do you want the outcome to be? So these are all really important questions that you want to answer. And so then the easiest way for me to do this is to make just a big old note sheet for myself. So these are a couple that I've made in the past year for various things. And so you can see I've got just headings of who, what, why, how, what are the outcomes, just bullet points or even a paragraph of what I would say to somebody or different resources I can use. And so this is what makes it easiest for me to get my head wrapped all around something that I may not necessarily know a whole lot about. Um, and so this kind of organizes everything for me in one place, so that I can have everything and then actually go into turning this into a one pager. And so these are a couple of the one pagers that Casper produced last year. So I do want to shout out Haley and Sam, because they are the primary authors of these one pagers. I know Haley is on here today. And so some of the things that I wanted to highlight on here is that um, what we're asking them to do, the legislators to do, is highlighted, is in a different color, is in bold font. And then we also have some of our most important statistics or support pieces, again, highlighted in a different font. There's different boxes, there's different pictures on these. Because again, you just want to make it really, really easy for somebody to pick up this piece of paper that you've given them when they're going in to vote on this and say, oh, this is a really powerful fact, and so I should support this bill that they're asking me to support. So these are a couple of the one pagers that we've done last year. And then when we take these to our Hill days, here are just some tips that I have developed personally from the couple Hill days that I've participated in, is that you really, really have to know who you're talking to. We kind of got burned by this a little bit last year, because for most of us, it was our first Hill day when we went last year. And we went into an office all ready to talk about our bills and how important they were and how great they were. And then they were like, yeah, I know, I wrote that bill. So you really want to have to tailor what you're saying to who you're talking to, because if you're going in ready for a fight to get somebody to support this and they're actually the person who wrote it, there goes your whole pitch. You don't really need to spend a lot of time on that one with them. And so again, you really want to practice all these pitches for different lengths, for different viewpoints, practice getting interrupted, practice different challenges that somebody might throw back at you of, oh, but did you think about this? Or other people might not support this because of this thing. What should I say to them if they ask me why I'm supporting this? And so different things of this. And again, you also want to continue to check where your bills are at, because if you're planning on going on a Thursday and then your bill got voted on Wednesday, that's not really going to be a very effective Hill day for you if your bill's already been voted on. And just realize that you won't necessarily have a lot of time with these people. A lot of our meetings last year were 15-minute meetings, and we had 6 or 7 bills to talk about. So you really want to make these very short, to the point, and very, very digestible for people too. Because, as scientists, a lot of times we'll start talking in a lot of jargon or using different acronyms. And if you don't explain what those mean, or if you don't use accessible language for people, that's not a very good pitch on your part, because your job is to make sure that they're able to understand you, and that they're, able to understand it on a level where they can then ask you questions and all of these things. And then I personally know that I was very, very nervous when we went in for our first Hill day, But you really don't have to be nervous, because they're all just people too. And even more than that, they are people whose job it is to listen to you. This is literally what they're there for, is to listen to their constituents and take their different views and opinions and listen to them and take actions based upon that. So, you know, none of them are going to, well, I shouldn't say none. Hopefully, no one will be, outright mean or defensive to you, because it is their job to listen to you and to do these things. So, I mean, I personally have had a really, really positive experience at all of our Hill days. And I would encourage, if anyone wants to get involved, I've got all these different options for me. If you are at University of Kentucky, you can join Casper. You can email me. Our next meeting will be next Thursday, so I can get you in on that. If you are more interested in learning more about policy, the National Science Policy Network, or NSPN, is a amazing source. They have lots of different trainings and recordings that you can watch and listen to get different backgrounds on things. Science on the Ballot is a program that I'm involved with them. And so that is basically developing questions to ask candidates for this upcoming election cycle on what their views and opinions on different scientific topics are. So if you want to get involved in that, I think I've put a link at the end that you can click on to get more information about that. And then KAS as well. We've got a science policy committee that is, looking at all these bills as well and trying to figure out what's important for us and what actions we're going to take. So you can email, this email address on the screen here, or our next policy meeting for that is next Wednesday. So you can join us there as well. And I also just wanted to selfishly take a bit of time to advertise. So Casper and Spog, who had an opportunity to speak at the last advocacy workshop, are putting together a poster session for graduate and professional students at the Capitol to discuss the science that we are doing with legislators there. So if anyone is interested in that, abstract submissions are open. And we do have funding to help with transportation costs and poster printing, if that would be a worry for anyone. So there's just some questions on there if that is something that you would need. So you can feel free to scan that QR code, or I'm sure we can get these sent out to everyone as well, and you can use the link. And then there's some resources here as well that if these get sent out, I'd be happy to share with anyone. That is the main things that I've had. So let me check in that chat real quick and see.
Maria had a question about what exactly is a one pager. I think you answered that, but
Yeah.
and what's its purpose? So
yeah, okay.
I think
So
you already answered.
sorry. But like very briefly, a one pager is just a one-page sheet that you would leave with a legislator typically, that has information on what you're asking them to do, background information on a bill. And it's basically just a very, very brief overview that somebody can pick up and say, oh, this is what this bill is talking about. This is different reasons why I should or should not support it. So just a very brief way to get an overview of your opinion out to somebody that you can leave with them. And so not just that they have to remember a conversation you had 2 weeks ago, but that they can pick it up later and say, oh yeah, I remember that. So I hope that helps.
Okay, we've got a couple other questions. Starting with, could you go back 2 slides to the symposium slide?
Yeah, I can reshare that. And let me find share that. And then
And there's another question that's probably a good one for Rob. Does the legislative record ever directly credit your work?
No, not as I'm understanding the question. I mean, the legislative record, focuses solely on the bills filed with lawmakers and the movement of those bills through the legislative process. So as far as something from an outsider ever being part of the legislative record, no. I mean, if I were to help write a bill or submit language to a lawmaker, that lawmaker might pass it along to a bill drafter, but the legislative record is going to reflect who filed the bill and its movement through the process, not anything dealing with anyone outside of that process. There's another question here. The state does not record debates with a question mark. And since I'm familiar with the answer, I'll just go ahead and jump in and say that everything is recorded that takes place in the committee meetings as well as the Senate and House chamber. I'll show you in a bit exactly where you can see that on the legislative website.
It's on KET legislative coverage.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, Madison, unless you've got anything else. I will thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
May I jump in with an oral question? Might be easier.
Yeah, for sure.
The point I was trying to get at with my two posts in the chat were it's an empirical question as to whether or not your efforts are making a difference. And it would be lovely to be able to do the research to demonstrate with empirical evidence that what you're doing does change things. So I'm wondering whether or not your work is ever mentioned in debates, people cite it or credit it, so that we could go through and say, wow, look at some of the successes that have occurred over a certain time frame due to your efforts. Make sense? Actually have empirical support other than being blind as to whether or not what we're doing is effective. Am I making myself clear?
You are, and it's a good question. Empirical evidence, I'm not sure exactly how that would be tabulated. Rather, it's more anecdotal, unfortunately, at least what comes to mind for me. For example, at the height of the pandemic, we testified on the efficacy of face masks at a time when there was legislation, to sort of move away from the commitment to using face masks in schools and other public places. And it's rare for a bill, if it gets a hearing in a committee and passes a committee, it's rare for it not to go on to come to the full chamber for a vote. But that bill did stop. Can you credit us or other people who spoke against it? Who knows? But I'd like to think you can.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
And another example, I know people are probably tired of hearing me talk about this, is the rock and mineral bill. There are bills that you can introduce through your legislator, and they will take it to LRC and they'll draft up the wording and it will get introduced. But the legislators' names are the ones who will be on the bill. But that doesn't mean that you can't take credit for it. You say, "Hey, I helped do this."
Yeah. I feel like I could make a case in any legislative session of instances where regular citizens had an impact on either the passage or failure to pass a law. So it's like I've seen it with my own eyes. Pulling that together into an empirical evidence report, it's not something I've seen, but there's evidence there nonetheless. Okay. Madison, anything else before we move on?
Not for me.
Okay.
I've got to jump off quickly, but I'll be back later if anyone has
Sure.
any more questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Madison. Appreciate that. So I'm going to talk for a bit now about other ways to have an effective impact on the process and follow the process. And my time is short because I believe at 12:30 we will be joined by Senator Christian McDaniel. So I'm going to try to keep an eye out for his arrival. But if If he arrives while I'm talking and anyone wants to alert me to that, I'll stop talking and turn it over to him. But for now, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, does everyone have a good view, full screen view of
Yes.
this? Okay. So as Madison's already started covering, the wonderful resource that the legislative website is, which is at legislature.ky.gov. There is voluminous information on this website, so it's laid out as user-friendly as it can be, but there's so much there, it helps to sort of know how to navigate through it. So I've tried to boil it down to make it as simple as possible of sort of the four main things that someone who wants to follow the process should be familiar with on ways that they can, know exactly what's happening in the legislature and have an impact, whether they're at the state capitol or 1,000 miles away. So the four big things I'll cover are just the fact that you can always see the daily schedule for the legislature. You can see the live streams to see live proceedings in the House and Senate. You can always find lawmaker contact info, so it's easy for you to reach out for them. And you can find all sorts of information about bills, as Madison started showing us in the online legislative record, where you can see exactly what's in a bill and where it stands in the process and who's involved in that bill, who's cast votes for it, who's cast votes against it. So of those four things I just mentioned, you see them right here on the homepage of the legislature website. I've put circles around where you'll find contact info, the legislative record, the link for the live streams, as well as the daily schedule for lawmakers. And we're going to take a quick closer look at each of those. So starting first with the legislative calendar. When we're not in a legislative session, the calendar comes out once a week. When we are in a legislative session, it comes out daily, and it's not posted super far in advance. For example, today's legislative calendar was just posted last night. So you sort of have to keep an eye on this stuff to get a heads up about what's happening the following day. So for a typical Friday like today, lawmakers are typically trying to wrap up their work so they can get back to their home districts, and they often don't hold committee meetings. So you'll see here the schedule's light on this particular Friday. It just lists the time the House and Senate convene. But if it did list the committee meetings taking place on a day, all those committees are hyperlinked. So you can click on them and find this wonderful bit of material that I've put in a circle here where it says meeting materials. Anytime someone's coming to testify before a committee, they often put together good PowerPoints to share with lawmakers or informational sheets. All of the materials that lawmakers have in their packets for their committee meetings are now available to the public, and it's a wonderful resource. So always keep an eye out on these meeting materials so that you can see the background info on the issues lawmakers are talking about. Going on to the fact that, as we've already mentioned, there's live coverage of everything that happens in the General Assembly, everything in the committee rooms as well as in the legislative chambers. There are two sources for this live coverage. We'll go to the page that shows that. There's both KET live feeds as well as the LRC, which is the Legislative Research Commission, their live feeds. Now, KET, they look at the legislative calendar each day, and they might pick out the most important committee meetings to cover, but they don't cover absolutely every meeting. So to fill in the gaps there, the LRC, and this started back in the pandemic times when people couldn't come into the Capitol, the LRC does make all committee meetings available through their recordings. So just to recap, since this can be a little confusing, KET shows most, but not all committee meetings, but all of the chamber proceedings, whereas the LRC feeds show all committee meetings. So you sort of have options of where you want to go to find what you're looking for. I mentioned legislators' contact info and their biographical info is useful to know. You can find that right up at the top of the home screen by clicking legislators. There's a drop-down menu to help you zero in on exactly who you want. If you don't know who exactly is representing your interest, you can click a Find Your Legislator link and zero in on your part of the state, and it'll give you that information. So once you know who you want, you can go to the webpage for the legislators and click on the right person, where you will find their bio and contact info, their committee assignments, which caucuses they're in, their phone numbers, their emails, the counties they represent, and very important for many of them, their Twitter handles, because Twitter can be a great source of news and info for what's happening in the legislature. The hashtag that people use for conversations about General Assembly issues is KYGA24. The last two numbers always represent the year. So right now it's KYGA24. If you just do a search on that hashtag, you see all sorts of running commentary from people from all sides of the legislative process, often given information that's more up to the minute than what you could get through traditional news sources. And Twitter is also a great way with your advocacy. If you put out a statement, an advocacy statement on Twitter, and you specifically tag certain lawmakers, that's a great way to get their attention. Let's see. Since I've got the screen up, I see Chris McDaniel's waiting to be admitted. Amanda, are you able to admit him, or do I need to close out of my screen share? You've got him. Okay. So I was just showing a page of a legislator so that you could see all that info I was talking about. And I also wanted to mention, you can see the list of all of a legislator's sponsored bills on their web pages. And last, I'm going to mention the bills and the legislative record section of the website, which Madison has already covered. But I just want to mention that on the legislative record portion of the web page, you can see bill summaries, the full text of bills, exactly who the sponsors are, and importantly, exactly how lawmakers have voted on these bills as they've moved through both the House and Senate chambers. And you can look up bills through the legislative record in many different ways, whatever is most convenient for you. If you know a bill number, you can go straight to that. If you know a sponsor's name, you can look specifically through the list of bills by sponsor. If you're not sure about any of that, you just want to know bills about a certain topic, there's a certain section over here on the side, right here, bill and amendment index headings. That is where you can go to a certain topic. Like, let's say you're interested in land conservation. You might see an index heading for that to click on and go to all the information dealing with that topic that you're interested in. And with that, I'm going to close out of this screen share because I have the good fortune to introduce our next speaker. We are joined by Senator Christian McDaniel. He is the chair of the Senate Appropriations and Revenue Committee. So that's the Budget Committee. The Senate recently received the budget, the version of it passed by the House. So the proposal has made its way to the Senate, which means that Senator Christian McDaniel is extremely busy at this time. So we greatly appreciate that he made the time to come and talk with us about some of the issues of the session that might be of interest to everybody here today. So with that, I welcome and turn it over to Senator Christian McDaniel.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate you guys having me today. Briefly, and then take questions for a few minutes if that works for you.
Sure. So people can chime in with your questions, or put it in the chat, whatever's most comfortable to you. As we give everyone a moment to collect their thoughts and start doing that, I'll pitch out two topics and see if you have comments on either of them. First of all, I saw that Senate Bill 1 was filed yesterday, dealing with endowed research at universities, and I think there's indication that there may be an appropriation to come with that. So is there anything you can tell us about how that's going to impact the budget process in the Senate? Or I know there's also a push on land conservation issues to boost the funding there with some of the one-time funds that are currently being spent in House Bill 1. I don't know if you have any comment on how the Senate might approach these one-time expenses from our historic rainy day fund that you have. So either of those issues to get the ball rolling, if you have any comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Oh, Rob, if you touched on the different long and a short session and how that all works mechanically.
We have not talked about the fact that budget issues come up. Well, I think in our previous workshop, not today, but previously, we did mention that it's in these even numbered years that are the budget writing years.
So what happens is this session has 60 legislative days for action in it versus an odd numbered year, we have 30 days for legislative action in them. We have they are constitutionally distinct documents. Also, actually, is a revenue component to it. So basically, we have to enable the collection of revenue to make these documents work. Once again, that's a constitutionally separated document. So this is a session. I get to build government. Time I also have a one-time spending bill that's come over from them. And oh, I'm here. I see an audio bad for others. Are you having trouble hearing me?
It's
been having trouble hearing you.
Try to put it here. Does that make it any better at all right there?
Yes.
It seems to, yes.
It does. Okay. Well, I'll hold this. I hope I don't look too terribly awkward holding this microphone up like this. Anyway, so like I was mentioning, we've gotten a few more bills than normal from the House of Representatives. So it's going to be a little bit different than regular. Rob, I can't touch as much as on the House's thinking about these land conservation issues, just because I didn't have any kind of a hand in that, and we've not had those conversations yet. Certainly, I can touch on Senate Bill 1. As a Senate, we've long maintained a pretty tremendous interest in trying to do big things that would move the Commonwealth forward. We found ourselves in a very interesting space this time around with a lot more in what's called a rainy day fund, which in essence becomes one-time money, but it's also the Commonwealth savings account than we've had in previous years. So we are thinking about the best way to invest that so that we don't incur recurring expenses without recurring dollars to match with them. Well, anyway, we are going through the exercise right now of attempting to dissect what the House has done, but also look at ours, as you saw with Senate Bill 1, which is the priority bill of the President of the Senate. We are investing or intend to make some investments in long-term research for the Commonwealth. I think that you will see a division based off of maybe research category, you might say. But also there's a large desire to see the various universities work together on these models. So maybe UK and NKU partners on a genomics project, or the University of Louisville and Western partners on something to do with air quality, whatever the case may be, really to kind of advance those causes. It's something we've long had an interest in. I started some of this work back in the 2016 budget cycle, which was my first one as the chairman, working on genomics, linking some of our researchers up from the University of Louisville with TGen out in Arizona, trying to do some genomics work. And we've really never lost our belief that that is a space that will only continue to grow and expand in the 21st century. And you'll see us keep trying to invest there.
Thank you. So anyone else chime in with questions or add them to the chat? And I'll ask another one in the meantime. So this is a group of students pursuing science degrees who want to make sure that the voice of science is represented as public policy is put together. And we've discussed a bit about, the usual route of being in touch with the process and contacting lawmakers, but I haven't taken a deep dive yet into the huge importance of also knowing how to have an impact on the budget process, where money is actually spent and prioritized for the things most important to the state. What suggestions would you have for new advocates on how they might be able to have an impact on the budget process?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the legislative process, period. The most important thing you can do is find someone with beliefs that you can get behind and that you're willing to help get elected to office. At the end of the day, we're all human as well, right? We have the same time constraints of time and money and family and job as everybody else. And during the campaign process, people who come out and spend time with you, knocking on doors or phone banking or the different things through the process, you just develop that basic human level of trust and empathy and understanding of where the person's coming from. And you tend to rely on those people or place more stock in what it is that they're trying to do down the line. Certainly, we listen to every constituent. I take every meeting from the 23rd Senate District. Also, mine is a bit of a statewide position. So, any other requests with a statewide mission, I take those as well. But nothing replaces in any line of work long-term relationship building. It's all about trust, which leads to credibility, which leads to just impact on decision making. And it's not just the budget; it's anything like that at all. Now. It further helps the case if there is either a regional or statewide constituency that's interested in the same thing. I have lots of individuals who are interested in things, and I get requests everywhere from a few $1,000s up to billions of dollars, and everywhere in between. And so you try to balance what is the statewide impact of this, and how does it further the Commonwealth, or does it just satisfy a niche, right? So building those constituencies, taking those concerns to lawmakers, and trying to have them help you understand, or trying to help them understand where it is you're coming from in the confines of a budget. I mean, keep in mind, it's $130 billion that we are charged with appropriating over the course of about 3 months, and what we appropriate for ranges for everything from education to justice to state police to crime labs, or like you said, nature conservancy, colleges, on and on and on. And so it's just a huge swath of issues that we deal with.
We do have a question in the chat, and the question is, do you incentivize fundraising for higher education with matching grants from the state?
So it depends on what you define as fundraising exactly. We do have state dollars that we fall down items. And then we also have certain public-private partnerships that the universities can engage with, and utilize those dollars. I saw that pop up. I think it said for construction projects.
Yeah, specifically building projects, yes.
So we have done some building project matching in the past. There's not a specific pot of money that sits there for building projects, but a lot of times the universities will bring us something, say, hey, a request from somebody to do this. They left us $30 million. It's a $50 million project. Can you help with that? But normally we don't have money just set aside for a university to go and try to engage money, right? We have matched money in the past, but we normally don't have a pot of money specifically allocated for that.
Any other questions? If not, I'll ask. Oh, yes, Amanda?
Oh, I would thank you. Amanda Fuller with Kentucky Academy of Science. Just wondering, I'm glad you mentioned like the Senate's desire to look at one-time expenses that don't incur recurring costs. I'm sure that's something that's of concern to people. The Land Conservation Fund is something that our organization has been advocating for many years, and we have a representative on the board for the fund. It seems like feeding that fund, which has been sort of swept in previous years, like feeding money back into that fund that needs to be replaced would be an excellent way to spend some of those rainy day funds. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that. I'm sure a lot of people have been talking about it this year.
Yeah, so swept funds is a fundamental pet peeve of mine. And I don't care if it's land conservation or the Heritage Trust, the CLEP program, or take your pick. When I came on board back in 13, um, the previous two administrations ago was sweeping funds from every which way but loose. I mean, the beauticians, the nurses, everybody had a fund was getting swept. We have winnowed that down to virtually nothing. There's a small, it's not actually a sweep, it's a transfer that occurs with petroleum storage tank fund. But other than that, we've gotten rid of all those sweeps together. I'm a huge fan of the idea that if we tell people we're going to tax for a particular item, we spend on that item. Or if we tell people there's a license plate fee for a particular item, it gets applied to that item. And so we've really gotten back to that very basic discipline of accomplishing those things. And we'll continue to push on that. Will we use some of the one-time dollars to replenish old sweeps? To be frank, it's not a concept I had thought about at all, but it might not be a bad thing to explore either. So I'll, take a look at that.
Perhaps we could follow up and send you some suggestions.
Yeah, that would be fine. That would be fine. And so I see a question from Mark there about guidelines for conserving and protecting rainy day fund. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there is a huge, not a huge debate, but we're having a debate right now about what is the appropriate amount of a rainy day fund. A decade ago, we had zero money in the state's rainy day fund. I mean, we were given the monopoly simply. Diligently since then. Under the House's plan, we'd have about 33% of the general fund budget in the rainy day fund, probably more than necessarily should be there. And so there's this ongoing debate about what is the appropriate amount to have in a rainy day fund. The answer varies state to state. A lot of times based off of the volatility of their income sources, particularly mineral states like Oklahoma and Alaska particularly come to mind. They have to have a much higher rainy day fund because so much of their budget of their state is dependent on minerals. And as you know, mineral prices can just, go up and down so quickly. And so they have to have a larger rainy day fund just to kind of bridge the valleys in their finances.
Senator, your audio is cutting out again. I don't know if you could hold that microphone closer. We're hanging on every word. Thank you.
Is that any better at this point? Yeah. Okay. So the long and short is we believe it's north of 10%, not as high as 33. And we are trying to put parameters around it. Yes.
Well, thank you. And with that, we'll need to cut off the questioning. We are so thankful that Senator McDaniel took the time to be with us today at a time where I know he's extremely busy. So, Senator, thank you for your service and being with us today.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the questions. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too. Bye. All right. Well, thank you. And so moving on our agenda, we have arrived at the portion for a panel discussion that is going to be moderated by the chair of the KAS Science Policy Committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Trent Garrison.
Hello again, everyone. I'm happy you all are here today. And I'm very happy to see that we have our three guests on in the waiting area. Today we have Ashley Williams, who is the Executive Director of Kentucky Resource Council. We have Lane Boldman, who is the Executive Director of the Kentucky Conservation Committee. And we also have Kara Stewart, who is Director of Policy Advocacy for Kentucky Voices of Health. So I don't know, I just got out of a meeting, so I don't know what to kind of running by the seat of my pants today, but I don't know what's the best way to go about doing this. I thought maybe we would let you all introduce yourselves just really quickly and maybe just kind of go down the list and open it up for for conversations and questions. We're pretty informal here. So I would welcome those of you who want to ask a question as we're going along to turn your camera on, and if you want to, you don't have to, but turn your camera on and just raise your hand, and we'll let you ask a question. So with that, let's start with Ashley.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. I'm Ashley Wilms. I'm Executive Director of Kentucky Resources Council. I'm also an attorney. KRC is a statewide public interest environmental law and advocacy organization. We represent those living downhill, downwind, and downstream of environmental issues. But we also do a lot of policy work. And I'm a registered lobbyist for KRC. And so we're in Frankfurt this session, tracking bills and looking at various issues.
Excellent. Lane, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Lane Boldman. I'm with the Kentucky Conservation Committee. We're a statewide organization as well. We're one of Kentucky's oldest environmental collaboratives, and we work both with individuals and organizations to provide lobbying services on the public's behalf on environmental issues, and also work on public policy. And KRC and we both see each other a lot in the hallways, where we provide 2 registered lobbyists for organizations to represent their issues. And thank you, Amanda, for bringing up the heritage issue. I would love to talk about that.
Good to see you back, Lane. And Kara.
Same, but different. Also a registered lobbyist, also an attorney, not from a super old organization. Kentucky Voices for Health is not nearly as old as Lane's organization. But we do consumer health advocacy. So we look at the slice of the pie that affects everyone on this call and everyone in Kentucky. Because there's a lot of folks from the payers' perspective at the table when it comes to health, and a lot of folks at the table for providers. And we try to bring the patient consumer perspective to that.
Excellent. Happy you all are here. I think what I would like to do is just kind of open it up to the 3 of you first, and I would love to have any questions come in. Let me just put the question out there. What bills are you watching right now that are of interest, of concern? What kinds of things are making you happy that you see going through the state legislature right now? What are some of the most concerning ones? And just have others opine about that.
Trent, we do harm prevention. All of us do harm prevention. So yeah, let's just talk about the fluoride. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it depends on any given week what the hot bill of the day that we love and the hot bill of the day that we oppose. But this week we've been really hunkering down on an environmental bill on electric vehicles, which has momentum, and we want to keep that momentum up. And then the heritage issue are probably the 2 big things of the week. But it changes weekly or daily.
Yeah, I mean, I really wasn't paying a whole ton of attention to House Bill 141 until it came out of committee nearly unanimously, and now all of a sudden I'm sending out emails and asking for meetings to point out some very established science about fluoride in water.
Yeah, that was one of the comments that I put in probably just 5 seconds too late, right before he left. I was curious to get Senator McDaniel's comments on that, but he left right before. But yeah, for those of you who may not know, making fluoridation in water optional is a bill that has momentum right now for the first time since it was introduced many years ago. The Kentucky Dental Association opposes it, so we oppose it as well. I don't remember does anybody know the bill number right off the top of their
House
head?
Bill 141.
141. So
I put a link to a recent Kentucky Lantern article about it in the chat.
okay.
It's also on our Health Justice Trackers. I put a link to our Health Justice Tracker, which gets updated every week, sometimes every day, with what's going on with bills that KVH is tracking.
Yeah, we oppose as well.
Those are excellent resources. I've seen those web pages and we've used them in the past. KAS, Kentucky Academy of Science, also has a bill tracker. We've narrowed it down to just science and education related bills just because there are just so many out there. Rob and others do a tremendous job of keeping track of that. Rob, if you don't mind putting a link to that in the chat right now while I'm thinking about it. I assume that many people on here are familiar with that, but if you're not, check it out. We arrange it by where the bill is in the process, so it's really helpful. And at any given 60-day session, we may have how many bills? 1,000?
Easily 1,000.
Easily 1,000. So it's a lot to keep up with.
I just want to use that as an example too of where bills move, not necessarily because they're the most urgent or not, but because they have built a constituency group and have really effective momentum. That the fluoride issue has come up in multiple sessions, and the advocacy behind that is pretty well organized, and it was yesterday in the hearings as well. And you know, they brought some testimony that I listened to hard and you know wanted to understand their positions better. So you know, there's two groups that I saw this session so far that were just really effective, but they were very much niche issues. That one and a bill to allow organized racing on state highways. They just had a very, very effective constituency and turns out in mass.
I wasn't familiar with the racing one. That's very interesting.
That's already passed through one of the chambers already, I believe.
I also wanted to point out HB 445 that we're particularly concerned about, which would prohibit the Public Service Commission from approving the retirement of fossil fuel fired electric generating units. So basically coal or, natural gas units. Unless the commission finds that the utility has no undepreciated investment in the unit and that the cost to operate the unit are greater than the revenue that it generates. But this is just sort of throwing another roadblock. And the utilities don't want these bills. And so, they want to make decisions based on economics. And that's not what this bill does. So
yeah, it's totally political. And Ashley and I have both been dogging the history of that bill. It stems from an earlier bill passed last session, SB4, which tried to throw quite a lot of roadblocks around the retirement of coal-fired power plants. And again, people would ask me, how do we stop this? How do we stop this? But when I saw the line of constituents lining up to stop the bill, it was pretty obvious to me we're not going to be able to stop this. Not that we don't keep trying, but nobody was for this bill except the Coal Association.
Let me just ask a question here. I'm trying to be creative and also trying to get a sense of the audience. If for those of you who are listening, if you don't mind, for those of you who have attended a legislative hearing or some sort of committee meeting in Frankfurt in general, if you would do the hand clapping emoji. And for those of you who have actually testified, if you would give a thumbs up. I'm just kind of curious how many people have done any of those sorts of things in this group. So that might give us a sense of, what level to talk about what level to talk about these things. Okay, I've seen about 4, so not many. So I guess there are probably quite a few questions on how to do those sorts of things if I'm reading the room correctly. So Kara, Ashley, or Lane, for those in our audience here who are interested in, let's say they're interested in a certain issue, the coal issue or the racing issue even, or something like, or the water fluoridation issue, to be a little bit more serious, I guess. What would they do? What would be their first steps on how to go about advocating or opposing a bill like that?
Well, using the racing bill, which isn't exactly our main topic, but those guys were able to bring the economics into the picture. What is the state going to get out of it? What are the financial gains for communities? And that's always an important thing to lead with. Unfortunately, I would rather they lead with health or environmental concerns, but it's usually about the money. But what you would need to do if you're a subject matter expert and you want to testify on something, if you're following a particular bill, you contact the bill's sponsor, talk to them about it, see if they'll agree to have you be some of the support testimony on it. And oftentimes when a bill comes up for a hearing, if the sponsor is willing, they will invite you to help present to help folks understand a particular topic. We've offered that right now with an electric vehicle charging bill that's out there at the moment. It may not come up for a hearing, but if it does, we've got the experts ready to explain the issue. And then you can always submit written comments too.
I was going to say, but if you are opposing a bill, you might not want, I mean, you can always reach out to the bill sponsor, but they're not going to invite you to come to the table if you're opposing their bill. So if you are opposing their bill, the option, you've got lots of options. You can still submit, written to everyone on the committee. You can just send them all emails. All their emails are public addresses. You can, of course, call the message line. You can show up and just sign in to testify. No guarantee that you're going to get to, but if you might, I don't even know how to put the odds on that. It depends on the chair. It depends on how many bills are on that day. There's like a million factors that determine whether or not you get to. You can increase those odds by having a champion on the committee who wants you to testify, and by reaching out to the committee chair in advance and sending them an email saying, and the thing is, when I say in advance, it's you get 24 hours notice, it's going to be on committee. So sometimes last session, there were bills that were under 30 minutes notice, and some a lot under for the committee that's happening that's randomly announced. So there's not often a ton of time for you to be able to put these requests in. So this is a fast moving target and you got to hang on. But, you can send that committee chair an email saying, I would like to weigh in. Here's why I want to weigh in. I know stuff, and show up.
I think all that's great. I also dropped in the chat just where you can access the agendas for the committees, although like Kara mentioned, those often change at the last minute. But
I've asked this
to weigh in on that. I'm here for it because I'm on one about our declining democracy and our ability to participate by waiving the rules all the time and not having any kind of notice or people's ability to participate. It's every year they're being more and more creative in ways to dismantle our ability to participate in democracy. So I know that's not particularly a science thing and it's very procedural, but it's a huge, big deal.
It's true. The League of Women Voters did us a big favor by collecting all of that information in a brief because I knew it was going on. I'm sure Ashley knew it was going on. All of us were feeling the pressure of how they were hiding these bills and streamlining processes. But the League of Women Voters mapped it out, and it really brought some sunlight to the whole problem. I had people sending it to me saying, "Did I know about this?" And I said, "Did I know about this? I'm living it.
Yeah.
Deal with it constantly."
I also just wanted to remind everybody that you can easily leave a message for legislators on the message line. And so it's a really great, resource where you call and you can say, I want to leave a message for the whole House or a particular committee or a particular legislator.
I'm glad you brought that. I was actually getting ready to go there. So let's put a pin in that. And let me just ask the people in the audience, if you would type in the chat something that you are most interested in or worried about in politics right now, and we'll see if we can discuss that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, let's talk about the call 1-800-372-7181 number. I've been involved.
People in the world answer the phone.
Yes,
I'm low-key convinced they're like drugged or there's like something in the air, like because they're absolutely always super nice when they answer. And I don't know if this is breaking news for this group, but our legislature is getting a I would call it like a case management software or customer service software that they're going to be able to more easily and accurately track your calls and comments to their constituents, which in theory may be able to give anyone on this call an even sort of bigger voice, and that your legislators are going to know that you have contacted them before.
That's actually kind of what I was getting at. This is open for anyone who wants to talk about it, but I've worked in politics in the past, and it seems like the answer is kind of all over the place. So when you call the number, what actually, when you call, let's say, I call the number, I say I live in House District 79, and my Senate district is whatever. And they say, oh, they're really nice. And what would you like for me to give me your address? And what would you like for me to tell your state representative or your state senator? And you tell them something. You may have to do it very slowly so they can write it down. And then what happens? Like they send a card to the legislator. It goes to their desk, and do they pay attention to it? Those sorts of things.
I mean, I'll tell you my answer. Ashley and Lane and I may have different takes on that, and so may Rob, but what happens right now is it goes on the green card. So if you call and leave a message, it gets put onto this little green index card. And the green index card is pretty clearly just the bill or the topic and a yes or a no and a little note. And that is not the most efficient system, but it does create little stacks on legislators' desks. And they notice when that stack is on the same bill. That we are transitioning to this much more efficient, comprehensive, less paper tracking of reports system, which I'm really pumped about because it was something that I asked for when I worked there a lot. Why can't I have a customer service management software? And they were like, don't you know how to use like Excel? I'm like, no, I don't. And that doesn't really do what I want anyway. But in my take on whenever I worked in the House, which was what I've done before, what I tell people is if they get like 10 calls on the same day about the same thing, any single legislator, they tend to run up and down the hall and ask to figure out what's going on because they just don't get that many calls. And they get a ton of form emails forwarded and they just ignore most of those unless they want to claim that they've been contacted a million times about it. And then all of a sudden those matter. But generally they don't matter. But if you get phone calls coming in, because people don't do a lot of calling, they do notice and they do care and they do start asking. And then they say, have you heard from anybody? Do you know what this is going on there?
Yeah, you would be surprised. Sometimes it takes very, very few calls for something to get on a lawmaker's radar. Now, that's not always the case. I've had one or two topics this session that I've talked to lawmakers about through the entire interim session. And until there's a bill number, they tend not to really digest certain things. But just keeping it clean, bill number, thumbs up, thumbs down when you can is as much as you can get across in a quick call. Sometimes it's a little more complicated because like the heritage land funding issue that Amanda brought up, it doesn't have a bill number. It's a request as part of the budget. So that makes it a little trickier to get a message across effectively on a phone call. That's where following up with emails or social media, but you can call an individual, or you can have your request go to an individual, to a whole committee. You've got options on what your target is, but we usually tell people, if it's a House bill, contact your representative. If it's a Senate bill, contact your senator first, and then also contact the committee it resides in.
Yeah, when you call the number and you're asked, I think I may be correct in this, they'll default say, so you want me to send this to your House member or your senator, but you also can, if you want to go broader than that, if it's like, urgent and you feel like it's advancing too quickly, it's going to the committee or going to the Senate floor or going to the House floor, and you're worried that it's going to pass both chambers, you can always say, send it to everybody, send it to every one of them. And I've done that a number of times.
Or to the leadership. You can also just send to the leadership if you really want to get action on something. But keep in mind, the leadership gets a lot of requests. So you want to be strategic about who you target and when, and that can change weekly.
Yep.
It can change very quickly. Yes.
I did want to mention, since Amanda had brought it up on the question you asked Senator McDaniel on the Heritage Land Conservation Fund, I just want to make a plug for that because I'm really glad she brought that up. That's a campaign we've been trying to kick up more in the last couple weeks about sweeping back the sweeps. We did a calculation of funds that were swept out of the Heritage Land Conservation Fund. We've gotten different numbers from different people, but our best estimate is $18 million has been swept out of that fund for 3 budget sessions. Now they've stopped sweeping it, but their core funding sources have already been going down anyway. So we're making a push right now called Sweep Back the Sweeps and get some of that money restored to the Heritage Land Conservation from the one-time money. You can go to our Facebook and share a graphic we've got on that right now, but we'd love to get some traction behind that in particular because it is going to be hard to get some of these budget requests elevated.
Absolutely. I was just looking through the questions. I apologize if I've not kept up. There was one about fluoridation. I haven't had time to click and read on that study, but there was one about in the era of polarization, how can we basically foster creative dialogue on global challenges such as climate change, economic inequality, public health, etc.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to talk to Republicans at all. I come from a conservative family. I really hate the red state, blue state dialogue because I really feel like it limits us. I think it's a matter of just being mindful of what angles are effective for a particular lawmaker, regardless of party. I mean, when it comes to land issues, Republicans tend to think about land conservation in terms of um, fish and wildlife hunting angles, and progressive states tend to think of it more as toxic pollution in our waterways, and but they're all caring about the same thing. They want good recreational land and they want clean water, and you just have to really think about the angles that would resonate with that particular person. We had, because it's such a lopsided majority for the Republicans right now, you really have to investigate those lawmakers and what their interests are. We are pushing through a bill right now that is on electric vehicles, and most would consider that a progressive issue, and a lot of Republican lawmakers aren't being real favorable to that issue because it was making the Democratic governor had it as a priority, so it got political. But our sponsor for that bill is a Republican. He's a car dealer. We talked to him last year as part of an electric vehicle lobby day and got lawmakers out to actually drive cars so they could experience the cars. He has since bought a Tesla and became sponsor of the bill. So reaching out across party lines is not impossible, but it does get a little frustrating. You have to be very strategic about it and do your research.
It's also necessary.
Yeah,
Absolutely
I was gonna
necessary.
say there's not an option. You have to do that. I mean, I was trying to count how many legislative meetings I had this week. It was too many. I was in Frankfurt 4 days this week, which was I'm always there 2 or 3, but somehow 4 feels like oppressive. But I had over 20 meetings, and I think they were 19 of the 20 were with Republicans because that's what you have to do.
And I'll just say one more thing, Lane. You brought up finding out a specific issue that they're interested in that may not be directly related to the issue that you're interested in, but it's similar.
Yeah.
One example of that, Senator Brandon Smith, who was supposed to be here today, but he had to cancel. He is chair of the Natural Resources and Energy Committee. And though, we may not individually, we may be all over the place. We may not see issues eye to eye on everything. He's in my experience attending those committee meetings, he's very concerned about pollution and littering and that sort of thing. So if you go about it from that angle, that might be a better way to. That's just one example. That might be a better way to start a conversation with somebody.
That's a good example, but there actually is more of a backstory on his interest in that. And so he's interested in it because there were some companies that had approached him about gasifying waste. And so and actually the particular plant involved in that may not be something we were as supportive of, but he is paying attention to the issue of waste as a result of that. So they may not always be exactly in line with where you're at, but you can leverage those little bits of information to make sure that you're talking about things in a way that they're paying attention to.
That's right. And there's a question in the chat. How do you advocate outside of the 30 to 60 day window sessions?
Well, we talk about certain issues year round, and usually I take a lot of time to talk to the newer lawmakers during that period. It's less hectic. It's a good time to spend some quality time and get people up to speed on issues that might be a little more technical. For example, the electric car one was certainly more of a technical issue. The heritage funding history was important to catch lawmakers up on because this is something that happened before their time. The coal plants, as Ashley brings up, that's always challenging. You want to kind of feel out where they sit on that issue because it comes up a lot in the legislature or anything that impacts the coal industry. So we usually set a lot of casual appointments in depth with new lawmakers all during the interim.
There may also be opportunities, for example, before the Public Service Commission to come and talk on a particular case and give, have your voice be heard there. So, if we were to see, HB 445 get passed this year, show up before the Public Service Commission, which hopefully we won't. But
there's never a bad time.
There's also a more opportunity to testify in front of legislative committees. They're not voting, but it's easier to testify in front of a legislative committee during the interim. And the interim is basically like all but the first month after and the first month before. Although this year we did go through December, so it's all summer and fall. And there's task force. This year there was like a record number of extra committees, and so there was a record number of opportunities to testify. And that's the time when you can get a topic that you're trying to raise education understanding about. That's when you do it, is not during the session. I mean, I hate to be like a downer about it, but it's too late by then. That's they got marching orders.
Let's talk about that actual process of going to testify and going to speak in front. So I've done that a number of times. It's been a while since I did it, but I've done that a number of times. I know Rob has as well. But basically you walk in the room and there's a sign-up sheet in the room and you need to get there early. You put your name down and it's up to tell me if I'm saying anything wrong, but it's up to the discretion of the chair whether or not to let you speak. But generally, if you get there early, you're one of the first, I don't know how many, to put your name down. You'll be allowed to speak unless they're running behind. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Any other tips for
and people? I would say if they don't recognize you and if you're not like a registered lobbyist, you're almost for sure going to get to speak because they don't like to piss people off that aren't there all the time. So if you the real person hat, you're going to get to speak.
So I see a question in the chat. Do signed petitions carry much weight? I've got an opinion about signed petitions. People need to think about this. One, you're trying to educate people, so that's great. Nothing wrong with that. I think first off, you concentrate on what your personal story is and what your connection is to a particular issue. Signed petitions, I hate to say, largely, I think they're just building up that particular organization's mail list. And their effectiveness is okay, but I think there's much better tactics. Having real examples of how a law is affecting you, taking the time to collect those examples is all very helpful. Having large research papers. I mean, people tend to overwhelm these lawmakers with tons and tons and tons of research. They don't have the time to really dig into that. Now, some of them will. I really respect the ones that do, but build a real personal relationship. These people are in your district, right? You can go during the interim and ask to have coffee with them someday, and take the time to build that relationship instead of everybody scrambling when the General Assembly is on everyone's radar and somebody comes up to me like they did this session and said, 3 weeks into the session saying, well, we should do a lobby day. And I say, I've been working with people on these kind of things months ago.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I totally agree with that. Maria asks if there's something we want to testify on, is there an organization like one of yours we can reach out to help prepare a testimony or something like that? Absolutely. That's what this committee is here for. And we would invite, and as a part of Kara, I'll let them speak to their own groups, Ashley and Lane, but absolutely, that's what KS, Kentucky Academy of Science, the policy committee is here for. And during the session, we meet every other week. So, we try to keep up with the bills. That's honestly not enough, how fast the bills are moving sometimes, but we try to keep up with them the best we can. And anyone here is welcome to join our bi-weekly meetings, and we will help you any way we can.
I think we all have open doors on that. That's what we're all here for, is to help people navigate what can be a very confusing system sometimes, because it works best when we have directly affected people working with us. And so I know that's the case with Ashley as well. I mean, it helps us when we've got your stories and you're willing to work with us, and we can share information with each other. The electric vehicle issue was great for us because we had actual drivers of the issue, of the electric cars, that could really talk about the technicalities of the pros and cons of the new laws that were enacted, and the technicalities of the chargers and the vehicles and what they've run into. And that makes all the difference. And they, needed to learn how to navigate the political system, and we worked with them on that. And it was very much a partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great to know. And there's a lot of work, when we go through and we meet between, the last time we met and this time we've met, quite a few bills, quite a few new bills are out there. So what we do personally in our group is we go through and we rank them based upon applicability, and not necessarily at that day, do we support or do we oppose this bill? It's just, is this something that we want to watch? Is it science related? Is it higher education related, et cetera? And, those are the ones we follow, and we may or may not take a position on those, but those are the ones that we put on our website. And Rob has a tracker. Is it in this phase? Is it been submitted to committee? Is it crossed lines to the Senate? Has it been on the floor? All those things, there's a little timeline as to where it is. And that's really, really helpful. So thank you, Rob, for doing that, because it's a lot of work to keep up with these bills.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you're bringing up, Trent, because I've in the decade that I've been doing this work, our what we take positions on has evolved quite a bit, because there are bills that are just straight environmental bills, that like the kind that Ashley and I both deal with, and it's pretty simple. But so many of these issues now are intertwined with the social justice aspects, and that has been successfully elevated in a lot of constituent groups. And so we're weighing in a lot more on bills like education bills that we hadn't weighed into as much before, because that issue has become more divisive and toxic, and we want to make sure that people get good unadulterated information, not have political rhetoric in their education systems. We've been weighing in a lot more on voting bills than we used to, and democracy bills. And not that we had any trouble supporting those issues before, but we used to prioritize straight to core environmental issues, and now we've got a much broader net.
A more holistic net.
Yeah.
Good.
One that's necessary for you to be able to have access to environmental issues.
Right. The health issues too. I mean, I think it's indicative of how much all of these organizations, these nonprofits, are working more collaboratively too, that we're elevating these issues to each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't
Ashley.
take a formal position. We often don't take a formal position on a lot of the social justice bills, but we also include in our legislative update like links to other groups. So just trying to amplify, you know, what KCC may be saying this week about it, or the ACLU, and just providing, you know, basically, you know, the testimony or expert opinion by our partner groups.
Yes, absolutely. This has been great. We're running out of time. We don't have a whole lot of time left, so I just wanted to ask if there's anybody here who hasn't had a chance to ask a question in the audience, if they, you know, last few minutes to ask a question. Otherwise, do you have anyone have any closing remarks from our Kara, Ashley, Lane trio?
I was just going to quickly mention, because there, Rob had asked about the PFAS working group. One of my employee, one of our attorneys is on that. But I do think it's definitely something the state is now paying attention to, which is great. I know Kara mentioned SB 159, which would establish a voluntary PFAS blood test reimbursement program. And there's also House Bill 116 that would establish I guess a sort of a different PFAS working group to research the effect that exposure to PFAS has on health outcomes. And I dropped a link so those are the forever chemicals, and I dropped a link in to EPA's website that has a lot of good information on PFAS. But you know, we know, I think the state went out and has, you know, they've done a whole lot of testing, which is good. I think they're really trying to collect the data on it. And I'm trying to remember the stat. It was something like 90-something% of all, you know, Lane, do you remember this? It was all
it was
drinking
high.
water, right? Yeah. Contain PFAS. And so it's certainly something that it's an emerging issue. We're not, well, it's not emerging. It's something that's been going on for a long time. And the state now seems to be paying more attention, which is good.
We have some videos from our legislative conference, and one of them is on the PFAS issues, the testimony from the bill sponsor. So you're welcome to check out those videos on we've got them posted on our Facebook right now. We've got them on our website right now too, but at the Facebook will be the easier way to find those. So you can hear from her directly what her goals are for the bill. And then we also had a video on the land conservation issue and on the electric vehicle issue, and you're welcome to review those.
For anyone who may not be familiar, does anyone want to give a 20-second version of what PFAS is and why we should be concerned about it in our state?
Sure. They're synthetic chemicals. We call them kind of forever chemicals that have been used in industrial and consumer goods since the 1940s. And they are known for breaking down very slowly over time. So meaning that they stay and endure in the environment for a very long time. And like I said, that EPA link, there's a lot of studies that, you know, basically show that exposure to at least some types of PFAS causes harmful health effects to humans and animals.
And they're very pervasive. You'll find them in Gore-Tex, Teflon, firefighter foams are three of the big notable uses, but they exist in a lot of different places. So do some research on it. You'll see that it's everywhere.
I want to just keep pushing that Senate Bill. So Senate Bill 159 and a lot of these policies, the policies are nonpartisan by nature, but the process is partisan and political by nature. So you have to kind of weave nonpartisan realities and science through those lenses. And so Senate Bill 159 is sponsored by a Democrat, which is in the minority caucus in the Senate, but has some life and has some legs and has some attention from leadership, which is why I am saying if you're going to do one thing, let's open this door. And if they were to hear from everyone on this call, it would get a hearing because it is on the edge of getting that hearing now. And it may, but the folks on this call could push that over the edge.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kara, Ashley, and Lane for your expert information today. We really, really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone else who has joined us today, and especially those who have asked questions. And Amanda and Rob, do you have any final remarks before we depart for the day?
Thank you so much. This has been super awesome. We've had great speakers today. Love all of you for being here, and really appreciate all the energy we have for, infusing science into the policy process. I do want to point people to a job announcement that we just posted this week. If you are passionate about sharing science with policymakers and sharing science with the general public to educate folks about why it's important, science communication position is going to be doing some of that work. Rob is doing it now. Rob's doing an amazing job. Rob is not going to be with us too much longer. And so I would really encourage some folks here, if this is something you're interested in, please take a look at that job announcement and apply and share it with anybody else who's interested. Thank you.
You're on mute, Rob.
Oh, and just pointing out that PFAS bill is on both the House and the Senate side. There's a different bill number on the House side.
Yeah.
That one's for the working group.
All right. Thank you, Lane. I appreciate everyone for being here today. I'm going to try to wrap things up in the final 1 minute by mentioning that now that you all have gotten to hear about some of the main issues moving forward through the legislature of interest to the science community, you can expect to receive a survey from me to help prioritize which of the issues you really care most about, and that'll help inform action alerts that we send out to you as bills move through the process at the timely points when your input might be most helpful. And also, I'll say, even though one of the senators scheduled to be here today didn't make it, that might give us an opportunity to come together again. You all have earned your science advocacy certificates by being here for 2 meetings, but my thoughts are now spinning about the possibility of having this senator come back. He's the chair of the Senate Natural Resources and Environment Committee, so that he can talk about some of the work he's done on a huge project of preserving land in the Cumberland Forest area, as well as the current efforts to improve land conservation funding. So thoughts are generating about bringing that senator back and having a meeting specifically on land conservation issues. So be on the lookout for the possibility of that to occur, and I'll inform everyone about that. But with that, our time is up, and it's been wonderful. I can't thank everybody enough for making these a success and being interested and knowing that you can and will have an impact. So thank you all so much, because these are important issues.
Rob, there's one final question. Somebody asked, where are the certifications sent? Thank you all very much for those who have to go. Thank you.
You'll actually receive a paper copy through the mail. Unless if you ask me for a digital copy, that can also be accommodated.
All right. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.